Yes, rattlesnakes and other reptiles hibernate. I chose that word specifically, and some of you are probably already getting in the comments to tell me I'm wrong and talk about brumation, so hold up a minute, hear me out, and if you don't agree with me at the end, then go ahead and let me have it. But for now, let's get into it. Today, I'm planning on visiting some rattlesnake dens to see if they're outside on the surface in their later stages of hibernation. And I thought I would do something a little bit different before I do and talk to the reptile people that watch our channel. And by reptile people, of course, I mean those of you who are into reptiles, have some knowledge about them, and probably enjoy taking on that role as an educator a lot of times, and people say things that don't seem accurate out there about them. So that's why this is important. Yes, I said hibernation, and that is an accurate term. It's a universally understood word to broadly describe behavior and metabolic changes that take place with most reptiles outside of the tropics. Right now, as spring approaches, a couple of things are going to start appearing. First is rattlesnakes and other reptiles on the surface near their dens, and the other are these social media conversations that happen when this occurs. We get a lot of comments that sound something like, I thought they were asleep, I thought they should be hibernating, why are they up, is it early for this? And many reptile people, whenever that topic of reptile overwinter behavior comes up, are going to chime in and let people know that reptiles don't actually hibernate, they brumate, and the difference being that they can still be active on the surface in the right condition, unlike mammals that are true hibernators that just sleep through the entire winter. I hate to tell you this, especially if you've typed out over the years, they brumate, not hibernate. That's not accurate. So here's why. First, this whole premise is based on the common misconception of mammal hibernation, that it's this much more simple thing, that at a certain time they go into a torpor state and sleep over the winter. They don't get up and move around a whole lot. The fact is that mammals undergo a wide variety of behavioral metabolic states as well, none of which seem to be as simple as often referred to when trying to describe the differences between reptile overwintering in that whole brumation discussion. But this video isn't about mammals, and I'm not a mammal expert, so I'm going to leave that for you to look into, because that topic has a lot of information out there, and you don't need me to say that there's more than is commonly perceived here. The differences are not required to understand how reptiles hibernate, so we're going to focus on that. Let's look at the word. The term brumation was first used by Dr. Bill Mayhew in 1965. He's a herpetologist that studied flat-tailed horn lizards. And when he worked with those lizards in captivity, he noted that regardless of the conditions they were kept in that controlled captive environment, at some point they would stop eating, move less often, and enter this metabolic state consistent with overwintering behavior. He came up with this term, brumation, to describe the obligatory hibernation state that happens regardless of environmental conditions, to contrast with the facilitative hibernation state where ectotherms might go into an altered behavior or metabolic change based on environmental conditions. Meanwhile, reptiles like rattlesnakes can be kept in captivity at peak metabolism, eating and acting normally, perpetually, regardless of the time of year. So regardless of if a reptile is an obligatory hibernator and actually enters brumation, or is a facilitative hibernator and relies on environmental conditions that tell them what to do, both of these can be described accurately as hibernation aspects. With rattlesnakes in particular, even the assessment of their overwintering behavior is often oversimplified and just wrong. A comment that sounds like on warm and sunny days rattlesnakes might come out to sun themselves isn't really right. It's not that they can't do that, but there are so many factors involved in that behavior that this just doesn't describe it. The fact is that much of the winter they're actively avoiding heat down here in the desert. And the reality is that whether a snake is on the surface or in the den or far back in the den or up near the front, all these things are encompassed by the larger set of behaviors that can be described as hibernation. If it's a warm, overcast day in late January and a rattlesnake crawls 10 feet out of its den to go sit under a bush for the day, it doesn't mean that it's not hibernating. It means that it's doing something that's part of that behavior. This is just like if you were to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go get a drink of water before going back to bed, and somebody saw you standing in your kitchen in your pajamas, it would be inaccurate to say you're up or that you're nocturnal. It's part of a behavior that you consider part of your overnight ritual. That's your overnight behavior, and this is very similar to that. So ultimately, does it matter? And that is the point. No, it doesn't. If your interest is in educating the public on reptiles, whether it be for promoting their conservation or raising the bar and general awareness, effective communication is necessary to get that done. That means that even if these terms were interchangeable, everybody knows what hibernation means. Brumation requires further explanation. I personally see this brumation back and forth and the way that it's used in this kind of weird sense where the intention seems to be more about finding a crowbar to insert an opportunity to be correct. In many ways, it feels really similar to the whole rattlesnakes are venomous, not poisonous thing, where the intent of the person asking the question is often ignored in favor of this pedantic correction of the question. Instead of just answering it, answer the question. The fact is, overwintering behavior of animals, both ectotherms and endotherms, is incredibly complex and varied. And even between populations of a single species, it can look very different from one animal to the next. So this differentiation in the space and how it occupies brumation or hibernation or that discussion in a broad sense is just not useful and often just gets in the way. But brumation is still likely a very useful thing to understand and discuss, especially with popular pet reptiles that come from places outside of our normal native sphere. This is a book called Snakes of Arizona, published in 2020. This is considered the peak of modern understanding of reptiles in Arizona. So let's open it up and see what they say. Arizona black rattlesnake. Ratellus cerberus tends to enter hibernation sites earlier and remain in them. Let's pick another one. Black-tailed rattlesnakes, also from cooler environments. It's fine behavior. Again, the first instance describing overwintering behavior used different hibernation sites each year. And that is the case throughout this book. I'm not telling these people that they're wrong. I'm not correcting them in the comments. I'm going to use the word that best describes the behavior and gets the point across to the most people possible. It's hibernation. So ultimately, if you want to describe reptile overwintering behavior as brumation, that's cool, go for it. But before you correct somebody on its use, you need to understand that depending on which reptile you're talking about, rattlesnakes included, you may be wrong. And hibernation is an accurate term. The person you're talking to probably already knows all about what that means and has some expectation. So instead of wasting time correcting their question, you can just answer their question instead. This is just something to think about before that next time someone says that H word and that well actually part of your brain kicks in. And I'm going to wrap this up because it's really nice outside for rattlesnakes to be on the surface in their late stage hibernation behavior. And don't just listen to me on this. Check out the links below for deep discussion over decades on this topic, including the originating paper. And if you don't already have Snakes of Arizona, you should get it. And if you do have it, check it out. You'll find out that what I'm saying is consistent. You can go ahead and say hibernation if you want. It's right.